Welcome to the Grit Factor Podcast. I'm Drew Powell, and here we explore what it takes to succeed through the lens of guts, resilience, integrity, and tenacity. These are the values that drive high-performing leaders and shape the culture at the Insurance Group of America. Each episode will sit down with industry trailblazers, IGA team members, and inspiring professionals who have embraced grit to overcome challenges, seize opportunities, and create meaningful impact. Whether you're considering joining IGA or simply looking for the tools to take your career to the next level, you're in the right place. So buckle up. It's time to discover the Grit Factor. Jamie Noe, we're doing it.
It's good to see you, buddy.
Good to see you too, man. This is fun. The Grit Factor Podcast, episode 1. How do you feel about it?
Excited.
Yeah?
I really am. I'm super excited because we've always internally knew what we have. And in some respects, at times, we've had an opportunity to show it to the world, but not as consistently as we should.
Yeah.
That's nobody's fault but our own. So hopefully, and I don't think pictures and videos give some vibe of who we are, but
right.
Hearing from our team and what goes on day to day, I think will give a perspective that's probably never been given on the macro level to the world like this will. So I'm super excited, super grateful. Appreciate you doing this.
Of course, man. I was excited about it too. When you kind of pitched this, the vision behind this, the idea behind it, it made a lot of sense because it was like, at IGA, the culture here is very tangible when you're around the team. You know, I've been at a couple team parties and stuff like that. And it's like, but it does need to be experienced and talked about. It's hard to just
for sure
see it on a website or whatever without having conversation about it. And you're a big part of that. You created this culture in this company from the ground up. And I want to hear a little bit of your story. Before we do, just let's kind of give a general overview of this podcast. What can people come to expect? Just kind of your vision behind what we're going to be talking about in these conversations.
Well, I think you just wrapped it up. I hope, I hope, and the vision would be is that people see what IGA is about, what it's about for our current teammates, what it's about for our clients, what it's about for our external vendors, whether it be insurance carriers or other folks we do business with, and hopefully people that are not thinking about going into insurance like, wow, this is not what I pictured. Like, I'll give you a quick funny story. So I met my wife 30 days before I started IGA. And you know Carly well by now, but so you can totally picture this conversation. But I told her I was going to start an insurance agency, and in so many words, she's like, "I don't care. Like, I don't know you. Right. I'm not tied to you." And no derogatory comment towards a State Farm of the world, but she didn't know the difference in what an IGA might be and what a State Farm was. Right. And we're completely different animals. Doesn't make one good or bad. But anybody that thinks about a life insurance salesperson or a State Farm person or an Allstate salesperson or something like that compared to what we do, apples and oranges. Right. And so I hope this podcast does the same thing for people viewing it, that how it worked out for my marriage.
Carly had no idea what she was signing up for. Did
she still doesn't. And you won't either if you come work with us.
Well, that is a big part of it here, right? I mean, it's called the Grit Factor Podcast, and the point behind it is the culture here. Grit is an acronym that stands for something that it's not just an aspirational saying or mantra. It's what you guys live out every day, and it's 100%. A differentiator between who you are as a company and other companies. Why has culture been such a big deal for you from the time you started the company? Why does that matter?
Well, it's a great question. You know, I was thinking and I don't know if this 100% answers your question, but you got to fit here. And it doesn't, we're not about, how do I say this? It's not about good or bad or can you do the job or not do the job, but it's about finding the people who fit, right? So if you don't love what you do, you're not going to perform at your highest level, right? And so finding people who want to think like we think, and or also don't think like we think and want to challenge us, but see the vision of where we want to go, right? One or the other or both are great. Like you're about to have Allison Lee come on here sometime in the next few weeks on the show, and you'll see that she thinks very differently than I do, but it's awesome because she challenges us and makes us think about that. But she also sees the vision of where IGA is going and what that looks like. And so it's perfect. And so, but from a cultural perspective, if you're not willing to roll up your sleeves and say, hey, I buy into the vision. I may not buy into what this looks like or this looks like or this looks like. It's just not going to work, right? Like,
yeah. Well, and I think that's a big part of what we want to talk about is it is about the right fit. And when someone works here and it fits, it's a game changer for both the company and 100%. Their life. I mean, people's lives have been changed by working here. But if it's not a good fit, it'll be equally as bad. And it reminds me, the reason why I say that, do you remember when, we've been buddies for a while now, and I was in a transitional season. You had me go through the process of taking your tests and all that kind of stuff. And it just speaks to fit. And we're close, and you're a straight shooter anyway, but especially with
you're
me.
Unemployable.
That's what you told me. Right.
As am I.
Right. You said, Drew, and after you got the results back on my test, you remember what you told me? You're like, good news, you'd be a great salesman. Bad news is I would never hire you.
Well, it's true. And so, in that perspective, and it made sense why you scored the way you scored, and it was part of your story and part of who you are. But why? Total deal, right? So you're crazy successful. You started your own company. You're crushing it. You're going to continue to crush it. You could have come here and sold insurance, but you weren't the right fit for us, right? And so why would I waste your time and waste our time and money where you are now doing what God made you to do.
Right. I'm glad you didn't hire me.
You're literally doing what God made you to do now, right? Sitting behind that mic and doing what you do. And so it's not about good or bad. It's just about being the right fit. And so I was thinking this morning about that. It's like, I'm a 5'8" white guy, right? And my vertical is about 1 inch. So you're not going to ask me to be the center on your basketball team.
Right.
You're probably not even going to ask me to be the guard because I can't shoot worth a shit either, right? But that doesn't make me a bad guy, right? But it just means I don't fit on the basketball team anymore, right? Or never did, at least at center. And so it's the same thing. Like, it's about finding the right people that have the right skill sets where they can be happy, where they can excel. And you're talking about life changing. Like, and I guess we'll get in this at some point, so I'll wait, but. Man, I can tell story after story of people that are still here. Andrew Bennett, our chief operating officer, I think we hired him at a whopping $36,000. Employee number 2, essentially 9 years later. He's a shareholder. He's a chief operating officer. He literally, I couldn't do this without him. Yeah. Financially, he's making a lot of money, and candidly, he's nowhere even close to maxing out on as we continue down this journey of scaling the company. And so, Allison Lyons, I think you're getting ready to meet her. So, kind of a cool story. She started as an intern here. We met her where she was at MTSU. She worked for 5 years, and she resigned and went to a competitor for 11 months, a very good competitor, very good agency. But she got bored and she liked the craziness and came back. And so she's been back 15, 16 months, and never say never, but I think she'll be here for a long time, and we'll be a partner in the agency, and she's my right-hand person. She handles all my largest accounts and takes care of me. So, again, started as an intern. She's just turned 28 years old, and I wish I was making half of what she's making at 28.
Right,
I mean, so lots of cool stories in that.
And I love that. And one thing I've noticed is that you do take care of the people when it is the right fit, and people get in and work hard for you. This is a company where there's a lot of growth opportunities for those right people, and that's something that is important to you. You want
100%.
And I hope it's okay for me to share this, but we were having a conversation not too long ago, and you said something to the effect, and course correct me here, but something to the effect of, I don't have a whole lot of ego around Jamie Noe and my brand, but I do want to build a company where people can find success and find freedom and find fulfillment. Say that in your own words.
I think what I said exactly is you were. It was around the context of building a brand around me, and I said I don't have an ego about that. But don't misunderstand. I got an ego. My ego is to drive this company. It's for IGA, and we were just talking about the books that are behind you. And the great leaders in Good to Great. Like, that book's like 30 years old now, but it's still the best business book of all time. And it talks about those great leaders that it's not that they didn't have ego, but they didn't have ego about themselves or putting themselves first. It was about the company and driving the company forward. And that's my heart. Like, it's my heart is to grow something super cool, super fun, really hard. This is a hard place to work. I don't want to sugarcoat that. Yeah. Like, we drive hard, but create opportunities for people that they never could get anywhere else. And then for me, on my personal faith journey, to give the glory to Jesus, right? And like, that's the deal. Like, If it wasn't about that, I can assure you I would do a lot. I'd make a lot of decisions, both short term and long term, a lot differently. But I love that. I get off on that.
I've heard you say a lot, and I want to go back and hear a little bit of your story and how you started IGA. But you said your line is you jumped off a cliff with Jesus. You say that's a part of your spiel when people ask you about and I love that about you. You're unapologetic about your personal faith, and not that you project that on other people, but for you that you hold true to what you value. But talk about that, jumping off the cliff. Give a little bit of the backstory of how IGA started.
Yeah, so I worked for a large regional firm. It was about 600 employees. They were 26th largest in the country. In 2011, they sold to a private equity-driven insurance agency. Tried to resign then, didn't work out. I ended up getting talked into staying in some equity to stay. Stuck it out for about another 3.5 years, but it just was, honestly, I was not in a good headspace, right? Mm-hmm. So another thing I'm very open about is I fight depression, and I don't think that's a weakness. I think that's a strength.
Right.
And so I was depressed. I was single. I just wasn't in a good headspace, and so felt like God really convicted me, like, you need to go do something. And so in the insurance space, so we're an insurance agency or insurance broker. So the easiest way for people who aren't familiar with the insurance space to understand this, if you think about whatever local community you live in, there's an independent insurance agency on the corner, right? And they'll have these signs up that they represent Progressive or they represent Travelers Insurance. So we're a broker. We're an independent agency. So in that space, you can tell people all day how smart you are in insurance or how good of a salesperson you are. But if you don't have insurance carriers that are willing to do business with you, you got nothing. And that's like one of the biggest fears of people starting an agency or going away from a big firm that they work with or whatever, is being able to get the carriers that can give the products and the pricing to be competitive to compete with the larger agencies, right? And so so what I've said for the last 10 years now, we just had our 10-year anniversary, is that I raised $550,000 of cash from a group of clients, 2 CPAs and 1 childhood best friend, and walked out the door with no insurance companies, no bond companies, no clients, took a 50% pay cut and jumped off a cliff with Jesus. And so that's
10 years ago.
10 years ago.
A little over 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I was telling the story a minute ago with you offline, but in your previous life and how we met, I resigned October 17th. I'd raised this $550,000 in cash, and then 45 days later, I go on a mission trip halfway across the world to Calcutta, India. And when I say halfway across the world, if you literally look at Nashville, Tennessee, and you look at Calcutta, India, it is exactly halfway across the world. And I was negotiating, trying to buy some of my book of business from the previous agency when I was literally halfway across the world.
That's wild. Well, I wonder how that trip actually shaped the foundations, the beginning of this business. You can't help but be impacted by what you experienced there. And I wonder how that has been hardwired into the DNA of the company. That's
a great question. That's a question I hadn't thought about in a long time, but it's so true. So, entrepreneurship is all about getting your teeth kicked in. You're going to get beat up. You're going to get knocked down. You just got to get back up, get back up, get back up. And so, we were in Calcutta, India, which is kind of the has and has-nots, right? I mean, you may be on one block and there's a Porsche dealership, and then 2 blocks down, we were in a slum where literally a church that I used to be involved in put porta potties in, and they have to walk a half a mile to get running water, and the abuse of adults to their own children is just unbelievable. And I say all that in context of, like, when you see that and you see these people like literally have to walk a mile to get running water and porta potty, they're excited to have a porta potty, and then the day that I get my teeth kicked in and some insurance company doesn't do what I want to, or a prospective client tells me no, or a prospective employee chooses not to come, it's like it certainly gave a lot of perspective of my worst day is better than their best day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so get back up in a very polite way, suck it up, buttercup. Yeah. And get back at it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yep.
I've been given this great opportunity. Like, so what? Get up, let's go.
Takes what it takes, right?
Grit factor.
Grit factor. That's it. Well, that's the heart behind it. Talk a little bit about. Well, hold on. Pause for just a second, because I want you to brag a little bit on the thing that I know is most important to you. Talk about your kids for just a second. I want people to get to know who you are. But I know at the end of the day, everything you do is that's your why. So as people are getting to know you and listening and watching this podcast, brag on your family just for a second.
Well, yeah, and I brag on my wife too, because I'd like to stay married.
Yeah. Good man.
So I'm married to my best friend, Carly. We've been married for 8 years, been together for 10. God dropped her in my life literally 30 days before I started the agency. And it's kind of a cool story. She was living in a little bitty apartment, driving her grandmother's car. And I'd been single for a few years, and I'm totally going haywire on you, but this is a cool story. I dated a lot of different people, and all these people I were dating were wanting me to have money, and I just didn't have it. Like, and if I had it, I'd already spent it, and so I didn't have enough of it. Right. And so I meet her. She's driving this old car. It's her grandmother's, this little bit apartment she lived in on the west side of Nashville. And I told her I was going to start this agency. She's like, I don't really care. Like, I got nothing to lose. I'm just met you. And fast forward 10 years, 4 kids. And, I won't go into our financial success because it can all be taken away tomorrow, but she doesn't live in a little bitty apartment. She doesn't drive a little old car, and she still doesn't ever ask for anything. So if you ever meet her and she has any kind of jewelry, or it looks like she's got something fashionable on, it's because I wanted her to have it, and just to tell her how much I love her and appreciate her for what she's been able to do for our lives. So God dropped her in my life 30 days before we started the agency.
She's been building this thing with you from the beginning.
100%. And then to another note to kind of tell a story. So we had been in business 2.5 months, and I had to fire my first employee. Like, and that sucked. Like, I didn't like that. And I'm gonna get to your question, but I think this is pretty valuable. So I've been in business 2.5 months. I knew I was going to have to fire my first employee, and I don't get off on that. You ever meet somebody that likes firing people? That's a narcissist, right? Like, I don't enjoy that. Red flag. It has to be done sometimes, but it's not something enjoyable. And I'd hired a second employee like 6 weeks before, outside of insurance. She barely could spell insurance at that point. She just new to the business and so forth. And so I told her, I was like, hey, listen, I'm going to have to let this guy go. I will babysit you. I will find you a mentor. And so I called some insurance carriers like, hey, do you know somebody that might want a mentor, so forth and so on. And one of them said, yeah, I know this lady that retired from a big agency in Knoxville. She's moved back to Middle Tennessee because her mom's elderly, so forth. So I was supposed to meet with her at a Panera Bread, and 2 hours before I did, and I remind you, I'd met Carly 3 months earlier. So my wife, I'd met her, and she's just my girlfriend at that time, 3 months, okay? And I met her 4 months, and the agency was 3 months old. And 3 hours before I'm going to meet this lady, it's potentially going to be a mentor after I'd had to terminate my first employee. My second employee barely had any experience, and I'm not a great operations guy. It doesn't take long to know that. I get a call that my dad's got cancer from my sister. And and actually his birthday was yesterday. And so, and in a couple weeks will be his 10-year death. But anyway, so I call him and say, hey, I've got this meeting. I'll pack a bag, and then I'm coming to Louisville, Kentucky to see you. They were transporting him from the small town I grew up in to Louisville, Kentucky. And so I had that interview. I had 30 horses. My wife's from Chicago, okay? And I leave her. We're 4 months into dating, and I leave her with these 30 horses. We were a 3-month-old insurance agency. This lady that I had said I would have a mentor for, she'd had 6 weeks insurance experience. She'd only done 1 certificate of insurance when I left to drive 200 miles north and be with my father. Saturday morning, the doctor comes in and says, you will see this is February. You will see this Christmas. You won't see next Christmas. So basically you got 10 to 18 months to live. He died the next Friday. So it's 3 months into business, 4 months into a relationship. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, is from Chicago. Again, I remind you, it's total city girl. Was taking care of 30 horses. I had an employee here taking care of, it wasn't small companies. We had people paying $1 million in premium back then. And she, bless her heart, she barely knew what she doing. I found out later she went home and cried every day. But by the grace of God, we got through that. And so I'll land the question about my kids. So fast forward, we have 4 children. We have a 23-year-old son named Emmanuel that's from from Cali, Colombia. We adopted him when he was 16 years old. My wife and I struggled with infertility, and so God laid it on our hearts to adopt. So we adopted when we were 16, so that's 7 years ago. And then we have 3 biological little girls, Lucy that's 5, Lindley that just turned 3 this weekend, and Lainey that just turned 1. So we got 4 kids, 10 years in business, and
it's incredible.
Yeah, it's been a wild journey.
And one of them is a big TV star as of like a few weeks ago too.
Actually, a couple. It's 2 of them. Yeah.
Was it? Yeah.
2 of them. Yeah. We were out west for vacationing, and our babysitter actually had my 5-year-old do a video of her dancing with the 3-year-old playing to Taylor Swift, and our 3-year-old had a pink cowboy hat, and they're doing this dance and stuff. And she's like, oh my gosh, and started pointing to our 1-year-old, soon to be 1-year-old at that time, said, catch this. And so my 5-year-old puts the video on her, and the 1-year-old, 11 months at the time, took her first steps.
Caught it.
And so our babysitter's like, hey, do you mind if we put that on social media? I'm like, we don't care, whatever.
Right.
She calls us the next morning, like flipping out. It had gone viral overnight on TikTok. At that moment, it had over 1 million likes, 6 million views.
That's crazy.
Fast forward, we get back home, and a few days later, a lady calls me that that was a retired professor from MTSU, and she was on Eastern time zone. We're on Central time zone here in Nashville. And she's like, your kids are famous. They're on the Today Show. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And sure enough, that TikTok video got put into the Today Show, and I forget the lady's name. Hoda.
Hoda. Yeah.
It was Hoda's Good Vibe Mornings, and showed that deal. And so
that's awesome.
They're all famous now. That's my retirement.
Yeah. That's super fun. Well, we talk about grit factor. That's obviously a big part of this company. That's hardwired into the DNA of the company. It's also, just because I know you personally, it's how you live. You and Carly have been through a lot in the last 10 years and have persevered, and so you can't help it. But it's how you live is also how this company operates.
Completely.
I've talked to a lot of the staff here, and when I ask them about what's the magic here, what does it make it work, and a lot of them will say it's Jamie, it's his drive, it's this grit. And so that's what this podcast is going to be about. We're going to kind of go deeper into different levels of what it means to live out grit. And so it's going to be about IGA, but it's also going to be transferable to any walk of life, personally, 100%. Professionally, all those things. Can you quickly just unpack for us the grit mantra and just what that means, the GRIT, and because we don't have to go deep into it because that's what we're going to be talking about in the next few episodes. But how did you come up with that, and what does that mean here for the company?
Well, so the grit mantra kind of came out of the word grit meant a lot, right? So it's all about being, people say, well, what's it take to be successful here? And I used to joke all the time that if you jumped out a window and you got glass in your face and you get back up and you growl, you'll be crazy successful here, right? And so we had to come up with a mantra around the grit. And so it's guts, resilience, integrity, and tenacity, right? And so it's so true. It's who we are and what it is. But I think that the answer is, and I think I said this earlier on entrepreneurship, maybe we were off air, I don't remember now. But the bottom line is that you're gonna get knocked, and to your point about this is life. This is life. You're gonna get knocked down. Tough things are going to happen, right? Whether it's personally, professionally, and it's the question is, are you going to get back up? And when you get back up, how are you going to react? And are you going to push forward, or are you going to back up? And and so grit is like, it doesn't mean it's easy, but you got to get better, right? There's a story Andrew Bennett tells it because he's retired from the National Guard now, but it's that it never gets easier, you just get better. It's what the military says.
Yeah.
It never gets easier, you just get better. And that's what we're about, right? Like, so you just have to push forward and know that tough crap's going to happen, but you're going to get back up. And the other part is being willing to buy into our system, right? Like, bottom line is, like, we don't have the perfect system. We're all a bunch of humans, which means we're all broken, right? Which means in some respect our system's broken, but we got a system. And the data shows it works from a financial perspective, from a growth perspective, from what opportunities it's created for people's perspective, but it's not perfect. But the point is, whether it's imperfect or not, you have to buy into it, right? Like, we've got a way of doing stuff, and if you'll buy into that, and you will humble yourself to do so, and listen to what we had to say, and be willing to get back up once you get punched in the face, there is 100% chance that you'll be successful here.
Yeah, that's good. So there's something that you say all the time. I quote you on, and I love this actually because of the humility and the honesty.
I'm really nervous right now.
Yeah. Well, you just said crap a minute ago. I was like thinking to myself, I've never heard him say crap before.
Trying to clean it
You're
up,
really
man.
censoring yourself for this thing. You say this. You say, and I'll botch it. And you'll correct it. But I wake up scared, and I go to bed scared, and everything in between is the grace of God. And you said that to me when I was starting my business, and it really deeply impacted me because, first of all, I could relate. I was like, man, I'm scared. This is scary stuff, right? And outside of business, just in life, it's like people are fearful. There's a lot of fear out there, but you have this mentality and this, it's really, a mindset in your leadership of I wake up scared, I go to bed scared, everything 100%. In between the grace of God. Unpack that statement for me.
Well, I'll unpack that along with saying that regret hurts more than failure, right? And so I think they go hand in hand, right? So, man, I everybody listens to things and hears things and receives things out of different lenses. So I'm a little hesitant to say this, but I've never held back before. But so why would I now?
Yeah.
It's my podcast.
It's your podcast, yeah, right?
Hope you can get it. But reality is truly like, by the grace of Jesus, I could retire. I could sell this company and I could retire. And literally in the last 4 months, we have literally doubled down, dramatically, financially, people wise. And I have no desire for that. Like, again, because my mission in life is to help people and grow something cool and watch people have opportunities personally and professionally that maybe they would have found it somewhere else, but maybe not, and create a safe place to do that. Right. And so with that comes taking risk. I mean, I literally wake up scared every morning. I got up at 4:30 this morning. I was with my personal trainer at 5:00 this morning doing a HIIT training, high interval intensity training. And that's not that I'm trying to be buff. I'm trying to deal with stress and anxiety and so forth. And then when things get quiet at night after the girls go to bed, I get scared again. And in between, it's the grace of Jesus, right? Like, so, I mean, it's taking risk. It's making calculated risk decisions. It's not wild and crazy, but it's still risk, and so to grow the way we have grown and the way we want to continue to grow, you have to take risk, right? Like, so many people think that, like, from an insurance agency perspective, they think like your grandpa's insurance agency, like it's boring. It's got, you got a shelf of books over there. It's got dust on them. I hope our books don't have dust on them. But it's boring, it's crusty, it's in the box, and we're anything but that. Like, we're pushing the limits. We're gonna always do the right things for the right reasons, for the right people, and do the ethical thing and be moral about it. But we're gonna push, we're gonna push things, and so and we're gonna take those risks. And so in doing that, that creates fear, because you get in your own head, other people get in your head, and the more success you have, candidly, the more people who doubt you. And so but I go back to the second saying I said just a minute ago, is that regret hurts worse than failure. I can get back up from failure. I've failed more than any human in the world. Like, anything you talk about, the little bit of success that we may have had here, there's 100 decisions behind that I failed at. We're just talking about the one I succeeded at. Like, we can do this podcast in about 10 minutes on successes. If you want to talk about failures, sit here a while, right? It's gonna be a long day.
Right.
But that doesn't hurt as bad as looking back and regretting. And I've had to think about that a lot lately, because we've doubled down. I say double down. We've quadrupled. We've 10x down, candidly.
Right.
And we're on a path to 10x grow over the next 10 years is our vision. And if we hit it, if we don't, maybe I have egg on my face, but I would, again, regret hurts worse than failure. But in doing that and taking those risks and continue to push forward, it creates a ton of anxiety when I wake up and a ton of anxiety when I go to bed. And it's the grace of Jesus in between.
Well, and talk about this for a second. Hopefully this is not too much of a rabbit trail, but this is just what you made me think when you're talking. You know, in my life, there's just so many instances where I'll tell myself, if I can just get to that next level, or if I could just get to if I could get to where Jamie's at right now, then I'll have no problems. I'll
You need
have no
somebody
stress,
else to look at.
Set the bar a little higher.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? In our life, it's always, if I could just this, or if I could just that. And what we're trying to outrun sometimes are these emotions of fear or anxiety or whatever else. But when you talk, I'm like, it helps me realize that living in it, sitting in it, and embracing that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
And I didn't have this list of sayings written down. I told you I hadn't looked at your questions.
Right,
It's like
right.
I'm totally freestyling here, but it came to another saying of like I read this the other day on social media is that today's inconveniences were your dreams 5 years ago, or something like that.
Yes.
And it's so true, right? Like I got to get up and make these 10 sales calls with young salespeople. 5 years ago, it's my dream to have that. And it's not an inconvenience now because I still love it, but it's like, it's different. And so, man, I don't want to say it's always chasing the carrot, because I don't feel like that at all. I don't feel like I'm chasing a carrot, and nor do I want to put that carrot out in front of anybody else and they're always dangling it in front of them and stuff. But I think that we all believe as humans, and there's a couple books back there called Winning and Relentless, and it's the personal coach of it was Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant's personal coach. I think I think we all think as humans that we can't get as far as we think we can, right? In other words, somebody can push us and we can get to places we didn't think we could. And so what I try to do in my own personal life is to push myself there. And that's, look, I've got a life coach, good friend, Bob Goff, that you know. I have a counselor. We have two business coaches that come around us. So I need a lot of guardrails and help with those things to help us think through strategically, both personally and professionally. But having people like that, and you end up going further than you thought. And then you get there and like, well, shit, now what am I going to do? You know, do I just sit back or do I double down? And like, I'm double down.
Right. And one thing I do respect about your leadership is your care for the employees that work here. It matters to you, because that's the thing you told me. He's like, hey,
it does.
You know, Drew, in the early days, I knew I could live in my car, I could do whatever. Now, failure means the pressure, if that's the right word, is around. There's other lives here at stake, and you care about that.
There's 45 employees and families that are here currently that look at me to make good decisions, right? Where they can go home, where they can go home with a paycheck. And not only that, then there's probably 15 investors that have a minority stake financially that also have either invested from an equity or a lending perspective to us to look at me to make those decisions. And so that's pressure, right? And it's so true. Like, I will tell you this, like, going back to like, I don't want to sell and so forth, and like, while we're 10Xing is like some of these people that you're going to interview over the next few weeks, like Allison Lyons, like Andrew Bennett, Allison Lee, Jesse Grinnell, they would have a job the minute that IGA sold, but it probably wouldn't be like it is today. And I want something different for them, right? And so they are highly wicked intelligent people, super gritty, pour into our clients, and so that's pressure to make those decisions.
So let's go here for a minute. So on one hand, you've got grace, right? The grace of God, everything, wake up scared, go to bed, everything in between is grace of God. And then you've got grit. You've got these two things that a lot of people might say are on the opposite side of things, because there's like, okay, well, I'm living in this risk and faith and trust and all this stuff, but then also there's like, but I also got to show up and do the work. Talk to me personally, and also in your leadership, how do you balance the tension between grace and grit? That's
a great question. I'm really glad you brought that up, because I wanted to land that, because what I wouldn't want to be perceived from this podcast is that we're using we're talking about God and faith and all over here, and then we still got to make tough business decisions, and we are a for-profit business, right? We're not a nonprofit here.
Right.
And so there's a couple angles here, but the one I want to hit on the most at first is that we do a lot of personality assessments before, and actually we're getting ready to do even more. So if somebody's watching this and they're thinking about potentially talking further about coming to IGA, like, you might as well get ready to take multiple personality assessments, right? And again, it goes back to me being that you're not going to have me be the center of the basketball team, right? I got a 1-inch vertical and I'm 5'8". It ain't happening. So, but I don't think I'm a bad dude, but I'm not the center of the basketball team, right? And probably not the guard. And so it's the same thing here. So we have made a lot of failures over the years because we bring somebody in that we like, or that, but ultimately they didn't fit.
Right.
And then because we want to show grace, they've probably stayed around either on their own terms or our terms too long. Because, we want to show love, we want to show grace, we want to be somewhere where people love. But the reality is, and I'd say this to anybody looking for jobs out there, this is universal. It's like, if it's not a great fit for you, then move on. And if somebody does a personality assessment with you and says you're not a good fit for this, don't take that personal. Thank them for that opportunity, because that's going to clear them up. It's going to push them down a different path that's more fitted for them, right?
Exactly.
So one thing we're really intentional about, and we're getting more intentional about, we're super intentional about it, but we're even adding layers into that, is people are still people, and I can't make a decision for you what you do on Friday night or Saturday morning or your life choices. And there's things that are out of your control and things are in your control. But personality assessments in 2025 are amazingly accurate. And so we are trying to put as much of those around and look at our key people that we currently have and make sure the people we're bringing on had the same qualities as those people. Because what we don't want, because when the right people get here, they stay.
Right.
They're here forever.
Right.
Like, they're lifers, right?
They do great.
And even use Allison Lyon. She left and went to a phenomenal other agency, but she came back because we're her tribe, right? We're her people.
They're
so
people,
and she'll be here forever. And so they stay. But we've had a lot of people come and go when they weren't the right fit. Not that they're good, not that they're bad, not that we're bad, not that they're good. It just wasn't the right.
It's not a right or wrong.
It's not a right or wrong. It's just about fitting. And so in saying that, if you get the right people, the grace you're using is in a manner of, they made a bad decision, made a mistake, but they're still the right lifers here and pushing forward, versus, rats. We didn't get the right person, and now either they're going to have to make a tough decision for themselves, or we're going to have to make a tough decision for them. And either way that works out, it kind of sucks.
It sucks.
Right?
It does. And it's a disservice to that person.
100%.
My story,
100%.
if you would have offered me a job after that thing, I probably, because I was in a pretty desperate season, I probably would have taken it. Also, knowing you would have helped me be successful, I was like, that would have been a safer route for me. But because you said, hey, I'd be doing you disservice to hire you because of X, Y, and Z, and for me, my
100%.
personality was, you're too entrepreneurial. Like, we have a system that we know that works, and you're going to be challenging all the time. Not that you don't like being challenged, but when it comes to knowing the system and what works, you've got a
100%.
proven and tested, way to operate. And you're like, Drew, you're meant to go forge your own path. And I'm so glad you said that, because it took me down a scarier, but a ultimately more fulfilling, and 100%. What was right for me. And I think about that, times where I've lost a job or was fired or moved on, whatever it might have been. Those are tough decisions. But at the end of the day, you're really caring about that person, because sometimes it forces them to go on the journey that they need to take, that they won't take on their own. 100%. Yeah.
100%. And what I would tell you, so I don't know who all will be watching this, a lot of different angles, but if you're somebody that is considering IGA as a career, and we get you to the point of interviewing you, at this point you will have gone through several assessments, which means you have a really high likelihood that you're going to be really successful here, right? Because if you hadn't, we would already put those guardrails and just said, hey,
Yeah.
sir or ma'am, you're not the right fit here, right? And
right.
so that's cool, because then that grace is more focused on, we all screw up, we're all messes, but it's about focusing on where we're going as a company, and we messed up on this, not like, oh man, we missed it and this person's just not the right fit. And then they or us have to make a tough decision.
Well, speak a little bit more to that potential person who's looking, who's watching this or listening, and is really just kind of in some ways courting IGA, right?
Yep.
And just deciding, because a lot of the people that come on the team here have been very successful in other industries.
Yep.
And you've invited them to come and look at being a part of IGA. How do you see the grit values really impacting the future leaders here at IGA?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's kind of two segments of our business. There's sales and service, right? And then in service, I could go 18 different directions, but just for this conversation, we'll use sales and service. So I'll start with sales. So we have it laser dialed in from a personality assessment, what it takes here. So if you get if I'm interviewing you or somebody's interviewing you on the sales side, we know that you've got that stuff, but you have to be gritty. I was in Mississippi with a young salesperson on Friday. I love this young man, and this young man is going to be an absolute rock star. But if I gave you his name and number and you called him right now and you asked him how his Friday went, it didn't go very well. And it didn't go very well because I was tough. I was hard on him. I there's a little Nick Saban came out in me, and it was because this young man is wicked talented. And his effort, he's working hard, but he's not working very efficiently or intelligently. And part of it's just maturity. He's 21 years old, right? And so obviously I didn't work very efficiently at 21 either.
Sure.
But at any rate, like, I can assure you, because of grit and his trusting in our system, that he probably went home and licked his wounds on Friday, but by Saturday morning he was up, ready to go, back at it, so forth and so on. And so I have no fear that because I was really hard on him, that he's not going to bounce back and be wicked successful. But simultaneously, if I wasn't really hard on him in those moments, he's not going to get to his potential.
That's right.
And I'm more worried about what he can be versus what he is. And so if I have to be the bad cop in those moments, it's kind of like being that tough dad love. Like, I'll be that guy. Like, you don't have to love me right now. Love me when you're wicked successful professionally, and you have a work-life balance in 10 years that's amazing in your mid-30s, and you get to go wherever you want and coach softball for your daughter or football for your son on travel sports, and you had the financial means to do it, and you had the flexibility to do it.
Yeah.
So you can thank me then. You can be a little upset at me now.
Right.
But it takes a ton of grit, and you've got to buy into our system and be willing to understand that.
Is that part of your leadership philosophy here at IGA from the standpoint of, because you're talking about being tough, right?
Yep.
One thing, and I don't want to blow your cover, but because I know you very well personally, I know you to be an extravagantly generous person as well, you and Carly. But you're tough. You've got you've got a gritty exterior.
Yep.
When you're in a room, like, you're a straight shooter, right? So you balance both of these things. Is that part of the vibe here? Like, are you going to get 100%. Some tough coaching when you're here, 100%. And also
on the sales side?
On the sales side, okay.
On the sales side, you're absolutely going to get some tough coaching,
because that's your background. Sales is
yeah. So if you're going to sales with us, but check this out. Like, and I don't want to just throw numbers out there, but literally in 10 to 15 years, you can be making $1 million. So we can take a 21-year-old kid. So you 21, add 15 years, that's 36. So how many people that didn't have to raise capital, that didn't have to go into debt, that were paid a salary along the way,
right.
and have the opportunity. It's not guaranteed, but they can make $1 million, right? And so I'm sorry, suck it up, Buttercup. Let's go.
Let's do this.
Right. So yes, on that side, I would say not as much on the service side.
Okay.
It's way more. I don't want to use the word structured, because it's very structured on the sales side as well.
Right.
But I have 3 girls, right? And I have a son, Emmanuel, that's 23. I don't speak the same way to my 3-year-old that I speak to my 23-year-old son, right?
Absolutely
and
not.
so the grittiness the grittiness is extremely important on that side too, but how we communicate it's differently, right?
Sure.
And so again, it's all knowing those personalities, what Enneagram they were, what how did they score here, how did they score there, and then we understand how to communicate, articulate to them, how to coach them, so forth and so on. And so, but I do want to make sure before we move on, talk about grit on the service side because it's super important. Like, you have got to. You've got to be gritty on our service side, right? Like if you're a person that's just said, we give you step 1, 2, and 3, and you stop at step 3, man, you're probably not a great fit for us. But if you get to step 3 and you're like, I don't want to screw up, I don't want to mess up, I don't want to do anything intentional or unintentional that's going to make a bad situation. But I think 4, 5, 6, and 7 need to be done for this client. That's a type person, and you've got to be willing to push through that, right? Like, again, on the service side, there's people that financial side are doing really well, but they're worth every penny of that. They've done a phenomenal job, but they've also done what it took to get there, right? Like there's been times they didn't clock out at 4 p.m. They had to stay till 6. That's not a consistent thing. We want work-life balance. We believe in that.
For sure.
Because, if you're worn out all the time, you're not going to perform at your highest level. So don't hear what I'm not saying. But there's times you got, it takes what it takes. That book back there, you got to do what it does. And so, but I will tell you, the people that had that philosophy, and I can name 3 right offhand. I think 2 of them you're getting ready to interview in the next few weeks, and the other one would be Andrew Bennett. They've never asked for a raise, and I was with one of them talking about the other one in a professional manner, but they're actually sisters, so they have conversation offline. And the sister told the other sisters, like, here's how much money I wanted to make at this age. And she's making 30% more.
Wow.
And she's never asked for a raise.
Wow.
I said, we're taking care of that person. Make sure, because she's a lifer here. She's a badass, candidly. And let's make sure she gets what she needs.
Right. And I can vouch for you. You take care of your people.
Yeah.
That's something that's really important to you. And like you said earlier, a little ego around that, actually. Like, hey, I
100%.
care deeply about caring for the people who are willing to exemplify that. I just have a couple more questions. This is great. Hopefully you'll come back. We're going to interview some of the other people, Allison, Jess, some of the people you mentioned, because I want to hear their perspective of what it's like to really embody this value system here at IGA. But there's a lot more leadership conversations you and I want to have as well that impact the company here. But a couple quick questions to close out with. What advice would you give someone that's considering IGA, that's watching this, listening to this right now, who's kind of courting us, just around this grit mindset? Like, if you're to say, here's what it's going to take to win here, and not to be redundant, because I know we've talked about this quite a bit, but speak directly to that person.
If you want an opportunity to go somewhere that you never thought was capable, both personally and professionally, from a financial perspective, for an opportunity to exceed goals, if you're goal driven, you will not find a place in the United States, in or out of the insurance industry, that will create opportunities for you.
Wow.
Right? We're going to 10x. Okay, hell or high water, we're going to 10x. And if we're going to 10x, we got to have a lot more leaders. We got to create a lot more people, and so there's going to be more opportunity here than anywhere you could go, without question. And I can assure you, if you're that type person and you're driven, you will never ask for a raise here. You will exceed what you think you're worth. We will exceed that 20, 30% financially.
I love that. All right, last question. We're going to go back, and this is probably an impossible question, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway because I want to hear what you want to say. For aspiring leaders, what is one thing that you wish you would have known earlier in your career?
Humility. I was an arrogant prick. And the older I've gotten and the more life has kicked me in the butt, the more I realize that you have to lead with humility. And I fail at this still some today, but it is my biggest goal to always lead with humility.
It's good stuff. Jamie, this is fun, man. Thanks for what you built here. This is an amazing company, and excited where this podcast is going to go, man.
Yeah, thank you, Drew.
Well, thanks for joining us on the Grit Factor podcast. We hope you're leaving inspired, equipped, and ready to embrace the grit values in your own life and career. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who's ready to level up their leadership. And if you're interested in learning more about the culture and opportunities at the Insurance Group of America, visit us at iga.biz/careers. Remember, success isn't about avoiding challenges. It's about facing them with grit. Until next time, stay bold, stay resilient, and keep pursuing excellence.